Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee and Questions. Awesome, we are live. Okay, so this morning I wanted to jump on and explain to you what the heck a sports dietitian actually is. I've had a lot of people call me a nutritionist lately, which is fine, but I just wanted to explain why I get a bit antsy or don't enjoy you calling me a nutritionist. But also there's so much confusion around what a nutritionist is, what a dietitian is, what a sports dietitian is as well. So I've also had a lot of people tell me that they've been trying to figure out their nutrition from the internet. They're trying to Google things. Good morning, James Thorpe. They're trying to Google things, trying to get answers for stuff on Dr. Google. And so I kind of want to explain like why you shouldn't be doing that and where to get good nutrition advice from. So I get a little bit offended when you call me a nutritionist, and after Coffee and Questions today, I think you'll understand why. So I wanted to explain the difference between those three and also why there's confusion around it. And then I also want to show you some quick little hacks and tricks to make sure that you're getting your nutrition advice from somebody that is actually qualified to be doing so. And providing it, because there's a lot of information out there online, particularly with Instagram influencers and a lot of people trying to tackle nutrition within their role. And nothing makes my blood boil than people giving unqualified woohoo advice that's not evidence-based. So I kind of wanted to explain all of that to you today so that you can get an understanding of where I'm coming from. And also because there's a whole lot of new people in the Dietitian Approved Career Facebook group. So a lot of you won't really know who I am or what I do or what my background is. So we're going to just walk through that quickly today, which is pretty cool. So if you've got any questions, type them in as we're going. I've got the comment section open here. Hopefully Facebook doesn't crash on us this time. And yeah, let's get into it. There's a couple of people watching. So if you're online, please let me know that you're here. I can see James Thorpe is here. But there's more people than just James online. I think Facebook is slow to tell me who's here. So pop me a little comment and say hi, so I'm not just talking to myself. All right, so one of the reasons I wanted to explain to you like what a dietitian actually is and what a sports dietitian is because you don't really go, like people kind of come to me last for their nutrition advice. And I really want to change that because often people come and see me last. Hey, Beckbed. Come and see me last after they've done like X, Y, and Z, and they've really fumbled through what they're trying to do. And they maybe have been on every diet under the sun, and then they come and actually invest in a sports dietitian last when you could have like cut out all that time wasting and money spent by kind of coming to the professional first, because you don't go to an optometrist for a sore foot, right? Or you don't go to a cardiac surgeon if you've got a runny nose. So it makes sense to get your nutrition advice from a qualified dietitian, right? Right, well, I think so, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people or the general population kind of value dietitians as the experts in our space. So one of my passions is to try and change that. Hi, Maggie May. Good to see you back again this week. So I guess the problem with the confusion is that Australia, I'm talking about Australia specifically, so Australia doesn't actually regulate the professional title nutritionist and dietitian. And I guess that leaves a wide market for misinformation if you don't actually do your research. The media also tends to use nutritionist and dietitian interchangeably, and it doesn't really make clear distinctions between the qualifications. So that makes it really difficult for you to understand too. So I totally get why there's confusion, but hopefully after Coffee and Questions today, you have a bit more of a clear understanding of how it works. So what I want to do is actually break down each of the professions and then what each is kind of legally allowed to do as well, and how to look for the right person for what you need help with. Okay, so let's start with nutritionist first. So I think this is the most confusing of the three because there's varying levels of qualifications that result in being called a nutritionist, and it is highly, highly unregulated. So there's like a proper nutritionist. I probably shouldn't use the word proper nutritionist, but a nutritionist, somebody that can call themselves a nutritionist. It's actually a 3-year undergraduate degree to do nutrition, to be called a nutritionist, and they have the same regulatory body that I do as a dietitian and have to continually update continual professional development points as well each year. So there is a legit qualified nutritionist. But you can also call yourself a nutritionist if you've done like a 20-minute lecture online, or you've done like a module in an online course. There's a bunch of companies that are doing certificates in nutrition to do nutrition coaching. So people like that can call themselves a nutritionist that might have just done, 30 minutes or half a day of education, which is the same as somebody that has done 3 years of university degree study as well. So there's a huge range of experience and qualifications in that nutrition realm, which is really difficult and confusing. So there's a couple of regulatory bodies. So the Nutrition Society of Australia, they're currently attempting to try and clear it up a bit. And there is a voluntary registration process that requires a 3-year minimum, university degree to call yourself a nutritionist. So it's called a registered nutritionist. And you can actually have that as a title if you've done the relevant study. And so nutrition in my undergrad degree, nutrition was in line with me for the first maybe 2 years before we split off. But they've done a lot of study in public health and food science and food policy stuff as well. So they're more equipped to do general nutrition advice and more population-based nutrition advice. They are not actually qualified to deliver individualized medical nutrition therapy. And that's the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian. But again, there's confusion because you could do a nutrition coaching course online and then call yourself a nutritionist, and that's kind of individual coaching. So it's really, really hard to differentiate. Now, in Australia, every dietitian is a nutritionist. So I can call myself a nutritionist if I wanted to, but a nutritionist can't call themselves a dietitian unless they've gone through to complete further study. So it's super confusing, right? Super confusing. And it's really difficult because a lot of dietitians call themselves nutritionists, or they might do that in the public arena to make it less confusing, but I think it just confuses things even more. And so I get quite annoyed if somebody calls me a nutritionist and I will correct them straight away, but I know it's totally not your fault. It's super confusing, and yeah, it's really hard to have an understanding of the difference. So I'm going to run through what a dietitian is for you, and then it might sort of highlight to you why I get a bit annoyed when you call me a nutritionist. So a dietitian is somebody that has done 4 years of undergraduate degree, or you've done an undergraduate and then you're doing an extra 2 years of masters. So the time in uni can be quite extensive to do dietetics. And we're actually qualified to give individualized evidence-based nutrition advice. Okay, so somebody that's got a chronic disease or some sort of health concern, we are the only ones that are actually qualified to manage that with nutrition. A nutritionist isn't qualified to do that. So our degree is pretty hectic. I'm not going to lie. It's an OP1 now, if that makes any sense to anybody. It was a 2 when I went through, but really hard to get into. And it's basically medicine for food. So we do heaps of anatomy, physiology, chemistry. We do chemistry and biochemistry for 4 years. It's hardcore. And then deep medical nutrition therapy. So like right down to detail of nutrition, and then the medical nutrition therapy for different things. Beck said, proud to call you my dietitian since 2015. I'd better go treat some sore feet. Yeah, good work, Beck. So Beck's a podiatrist. She doesn't deal with her nutrition herself because her mad skills are in feet. So she outsources her nutrition advice. Good work, Beck. Thanks for joining. All right, and I guess the other thing with a dietitian is it's the only qualifications that's recognised by Medicare and private health and DVA. So if you go and see a dietitian that's actually accredited and you have private health that covers dietitian, you can swipe your private health card and get a rebate. So that's pretty cool as well. To maintain status as a dietitian, there's a fair amount of CPD points, continual professional development points that you need to do every year. So it's not like you just get the qualification and you're done. You have to constantly be keeping up to date with everything and showing that you're maintaining that credibility too. Dietitians can specialize in lots and lots of areas. So you start out and you kind of know a little bit about everything, kind of like a GP, but a lot of dietitians sort of niche down into a specialist area as they become more experienced. So like there's dietitians for diabetes, chronic kidney disease, fertility, gastro health. There's lots of sort of specialist areas, and like I would see a general dietitian if you needed help specifically with one of those sorts of areas, or have a chronic disease or need just general help with weight management or just want to improve your overall health. You can, with certain chronic disease conditions, get some EPC visits through your GP. So you get 5 free visits to a health professional each year if you qualify. And so that might be a good cost-effective way to see a dietitian, a general sort of dietitian, if you need help with any of those things in that space. And so leveraging off, like not leveraging, but like building onto that, we then like build into sports dietitians, which is another completely specialist area as well. So I'm going to walk you through what a sports dietitian is and how you get there. And then I guess give you a bit of background about my experience too, because there are quite a number of new people on here on the group. So a lot of you will know who I am and where I come from, but there's a lot of new people that are like, who is this chick jumping on live every week and talking to us about nutrition? So in Australia, the UK is different, and I'm sure America is different as well, but to become a sports dietitian in Australia, you need to be an accredited practicing dietitian first. Okay, so you have to have done the dietetics degree, either undergrad or master's, and then you need somewhere between 1 to 2 years of clinical experience first before you can even start the sports nutrition course. So that's run through our Sports Dietitians Association, and we are accredited with our Dietitian Association to be an APD, an accredited practicing dietitian, and then we also need to uphold the same level of CPD every year and accreditation with our Sports Dietitians Association as well. So there's a fair amount of CPD to uphold each year. And I think also, just a bit of a side note, like nutrition is constantly evolving, right? So it's a space and an area that you really need to keep on top of and up to date with. It's not like you can do, like I studied, I'm not even tell you how many years ago I studied. It's embarrassing, but you know what the uni degree was back then, it will have evolved a lot over that time, because we're constantly learning more. Like think about all the new research that's coming out in gut health and the gut microbiota and microbiome space. So it is something that is, constantly evolving, and you need to constantly keep on top of, and sports is no different to that as well. Like we're doing, not we, but there are people doing research constantly to update our evidence-based guidelines, and it's always changing, which is why I guess nutrition can be a little bit confusing. And also I think why you need to see a nutrition professional for nutrition advice, because it's our job to stay on top of that. It's not your job necessarily to try and figure it out yourself on the internet. We should be across everything to give you a really quick summary of what you need to do best and what you're wanting to achieve. So I guess sports dietitians, our specialist is sports nutrition. So it doesn't necessarily need to be for an elite athlete. You can just be an everyday athlete. I think if you exercise on purpose, I call you an athlete. Okay, you might be a weekend warrior, just doing it for fun. You're a recreational athlete or an age group triathlete. You could be an elite age group triathlete, but you don't necessarily need to be elite to have the benefit of good sports nutrition advice. And I think back in the day, you know, like 20, 30 years ago, it was only available for sporting teams and, you know, AIS funded athletes, but now it's available to anyone. So, you know, Beck, my podiatrist client, she has a sports dietitian in her corner, and she is super mum and does, you know, exercise on purpose, but for fun, and it's not a career for her. So I think there's also sports dietitians that specialize in certain areas, and that's important to understand too. So there's dietitians that specialize in fighters or boxers, like those making weight type sports. Then there's also team sports sort of dietitians that might work with an AFL team or rugby league team or basketball or soccer. And then there's endurance sports dietitians, someone like me who specializes in endurance exercise, and all of you crazies out there that like to do long, crazy things. So I guess my experience, if we go through you know, how I got to where I am today, I did the 4-year undergrad course. Back then it was 2 years clinical experience before you could even like apply to do the sports nutrition course. So I did that, worked in a hospital, didn't really enjoy it because, you know, I'm not a clinical dietitian. I did my degree to become a sports dietitian. And then I did the sports nutrition course. And then to do that, there's a certain number of points and hours and like activities and assessments that you need to do to then actually qualify. So you're provisional for a year before you're a full-blown sports dietitian, and you need to have some pretty like big hours of mentorship and things within that to then become accredited. I then went on and did an extra 2 years of study with the International Olympic Committee. I did their diploma in sports nutrition, which is just another sort of level up in sports nutrition study. It is a global diploma, so a lot of different countries have a different pathway to get there, but it was something that I did after being a sports dietitian. And then I was lucky enough also to do a fellowship at the AIS, and it's like my dream job to have done that. It was 2 years, and then it got extended a bit further beyond that. But I worked with Triathlon Australia through that, and I guess off the back of that, they contracted me outside of the fellowship after that finished. So for the last 6 years, I've been one of 2 sports dietitians consulting to Triathlon Australia, looking after our Australian triathlon and paratriathlon team. So it's like ultimate dream job. And I did that alongside working in private practice. So I had a good spread of elite athlete, triathletes on part of my week. And then the other part of my week, I was working in private practice one-on-one with, you know, endurance sports, sports people, cyclists, runners, swimmers, triathletes, Ironman athletes. So I get to see a really good range of athletes on the spectrum, you know, people that have just started out in the sport and have no idea like what to do in terms of nutrition to survive their training week, all the way up to like our elite triathlon team. So the likes of someone like Emma Jackson. So we're really sort of fine tuning her nutrition at that level. And if you've been on here for the last few weeks, I would have talked about the nutrition pyramid, you know, so getting those foundation layers right first before you implement the sports nutrition layer, and then the sprinkles on the icing on the cake, the supplement layer at the top. So I guess the breadth of my experience is working right through that space with athletes, which I think is really cool. So endurance sports nutrition is definitely my specialty, and I would say that triathlon's my jam. Kind of live and breathe it, having experience in the sport myself, but also working with like grassroots beginners all the way up to our elite athletes in that sport as well. So really good understanding of how the sport works, and, you know, what all the events are and the logistics, plus also trying to manage triathlon training with busy family lives and things, right? So I think my superpower as an endurance sports dietitian is I know how much carbohydrates in a whole range of things. Like I can tell you exactly how much carbohydrates in different sorts of gels or sports drinks or blocks. Like I can do race nutrition planning stuff in my head, and that's my superpower. Whereas if you went to see a gastro dietitian, they would have no idea how much is in things to be able to figure that out. It would take them probably 3 times as long as it would for like me working in it day in, day out. Whereas on the flip side, like if I do some gastro stuff, I can definitely do it, but I'm not across like all the medications or the drugs or any of that sort of stuff. I'd have to go and look it up. So I think if you're going to see someone, you want to go and see somebody that is a specialist in what you need help with. Okay, so you don't come to see me if you're a boxer or a fighter, or you're a rugby league player or a golfer. Like I don't work in that sport day in, day out to know the complexities of, you know, how the training week works or what competition looks like or what sort of foods you've got available. That's not my area of expertise. So you would come and see me if you are a swimmer, a cyclist, a runner, and the longer the better, a mountain biker. And I guess my jam is triathlon and Ironman athletes, or like extending that into like Ultraman and things as well. So the 3 different modalities, or off-road tri, that sort of stuff. So I guess that's another pointer for you when you're trying to find a professional to work with is you're working with somebody that's a specialist in their space. So I had somebody recently come and ask me if I could help them with their fertility, and I was like, oh no, go and see this person. They're a specialist in that space. I could do it. I could fumble through it, but you're better off seeing somebody that lives and breathes it all the time. So sports dietitians, what we're good at is actually translating that deep science into practical advice that you can implement and understand. Because what I don't want you to be doing is trying to Google stuff. I don't want you to be trying to figure it out yourself and just fumbling through it. Like, it's a really easy fix if you just ask the question. So I would encourage you, if you're looking for help with your nutrition, to actually try and work with somebody that's a specialist. So work with a sports dietitian in your space, rather than trying to look on Dr. Google or asking your brother or your training buddy or your mother or your sister-in-law or your coach or the physio, or looking at the Instagram influencers, what they're doing. Even pro athletes, like, you don't necessarily want to be just following along with what they're doing. Remember, they've got those foundation layers now that you potentially don't have nailed yet. And so they might be looking at tweaking things right on the top end that you're just not going to get the benefit from. So do the hard work in the foundational layer first before trying to copy what somebody else is doing, and before you even see if it works. Because there's lots of supplements that are well researched. Like, I'm thinking of nitrate off the top of my head, where there's definitely responders and non-responders, but nitrate works better in well-trained athletes. No, that's wrong. Nitrate actually works better in untrained, and well-trained generally don't have as much benefit. So there's different things like that are important to understand when it comes to supplements as well. You don't just take something because somebody else is taking it. If you don't have the foundations nailed, then those 1%ers aren't really going to be of benefit to you. All right. Whew. So I hope that helps explain the difference between a dietitian, a nutritionist, and a sports dietitian. And I guess the biggest trick that I want to pass on to you when you're looking to work with somebody is to look for an APD after their name. So that means accredited practicing dietitian. And that means that they are actually qualified to give you individualized nutrition advice. If they don't have APD after their name, then chances are they may have done a 20-minute online course or another sort of nutrition coaching program, or they may have literally done no nutrition education at all, and they're going on their own experiences and calling themselves a nutritionist. Or they're not even a nutritionist or calling themselves that, but they're just giving you unsolicited nutrition advice. And if I feel like everyone thinks they're an expert in nutrition, but it's important to understand that they are an expert in their nutrition. They might have figured out like exactly what works for them. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work for you. And so you need to have an understanding that their advice is based on their experiences, and they are N equals 1, right? One person, one experience. They generally, particularly triathletes, are quite proactive about sharing what they love and do. And that, like, I think that's great. But just, I guess, take it with a grain of salt, is that works for them, and you can try it and see if it works for you too, but it's not necessarily going to. So seek help from an expert that lives it and breathes it and is reading literature and is constantly keeping themselves up to date, because that's their job, rather than trying to ask somebody that doesn't necessarily, do that, or trying to figure it out yourself on the internet. There's a lot of crap online. I get quite frustrated with the amount of crap online. I also get frustrated with people giving unsolicited nutrition advice, but that's my bug to bear. So I hope that helps clear up a bit of confusion, and also for the new people on board, just kind of show you who I am and where I come from, and give you a sense of who are the people that I work with too. So if you are looking for a sports dietitian, and you are looking for, I guess, an endurance sports dietitian, I'll put the link in here and at the end of the replay for how you can work with me one-on-one if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a more cost-effective option, I have developed 2 online courses that run you through a lot of the fundamentals of what I would teach you in a consultation anyway. but it's self-paced learning online. So you don't get the one-on-one individualization with me. So it's much, much cheaper. So they're two options to get started with nutrition information that's evidence-based and a great place to start. Chances are that you're in this group, you are an endurance-based athlete, but if you're looking for a dietitian that specializes in a different area, then there's a couple of options. So if you're looking for just a general dietitian, go to the Dietitians Association website and click on Find an APD, and you can put in your location and it'll show you who are the dietitians in your area. And then you can have a look at their website and see if they are a good fit for you or not. It usually outlines their specialty area too, so you can filter it by that if you know what you need. The other option, if you're looking for a sports dietitian in a different area to endurance, is going on the Sports Dietitians Association website and doing the same thing. Find a sports dietitian. Plug in your area, or if you're happy to work online, maybe plug in a specialist area that you need help with. And that's another way to find a professional that is like a guru in what you need help with. All right, so it doesn't look like there's any questions, which is cool, but thank you for joining me today. There's been a few people online, which is good, so I'm not talking to myself. And I really hope that's cleared up some confusion around what the different types of nutrition specialists are, and given you some tips on how to actually find the right person to work with you if you do need some help. So thanks for joining me, guys, and I will see you next week.